Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, Andrew DiCecco's in on this Thursday. We like to look at some of the matchups that he's looking at. He was at the game on Sunday for Eagles in Jacksonville. So we can get some thoughts on that and move ahead to the Cardinals. And, by the way, we just told you Jake Elliott is likely out. The injury report is out, PT. It's lengthy, and it's got 4 DNPs, including Elliott.
The DNPs are the ones you go to right away. That's Elliott, Johnson, Avonte Maddox, and Jordan Mailata. There's a lot of LPs, and those aren't records, Mike. That's not long play. That's limited in practice. And a lot of guys there, a lot of guys on rest, and that's fine. Bradbury, Cox, Dickerson, Graham, fine. It's interesting that there's 2 guys, both at the linebacker position, Kyron Johnson and Patrick Johnson, both with concussion issues. And then Darius Slay. This is the good news. If there's good news out of the injury report, it's that Darius Slay, with that forearm, he had a full participation, FP.
Yes, and on the other side of the coin, Matt Prater is out. Matt Amendola. So you'll have 2 backup kickers kicking. Wow. Let's bring in Andrew DiCecco and get the thoughts from him on the matchups here. And, Andrew, I know that Jake Elliott last week kind of gutted it out, but you were there. Did you sense after the game that he was not going to play this week and that the Eagles would have to go down and find someone else?
Well, I mean, the sense around Jake Elliott after the game, there was always optimism there. But there were questions, you have to have a contingency plan in the event that Jake can't go. Obviously, not having a kicker on the practice squad, what do you do? And the Eagles really made a statement the other day when they signed Cameron Dicker to the practice squad, really putting into question whether or not Jake Elliott was going to be available this week. And I think that in a game where, in a season and everything like that, where things seem to be going your way, why force the issue and trot Jake out there when he's not 100%? Give him a game's rest or so, however long it takes, to make sure that your top kicker is good to go. But Cameron Dicker is a competent enough kicker, guys, that he can get the job done in the interim, and I wouldn't anticipate it being longer. I mean, we don't know, but I don't think this is going to be something that becomes a long-term thing.
Yeah, it's an ankle injury suffered last week against Jacksonville. Do you I know Cameron Dicker. He's a rookie, right? He played at Texas last year.
Yeah. He played at Texas last year. He was 13 of 15 on kicks, on field goal opportunities, and he actually averaged 46.8 yards per punt with a long of 78. So I thought that was interesting, being a multifaceted punter. Obviously Aaron Sipas has not had the season that many expected this early. But, I mean, I think he's an interesting add. I mean, he bounced around a little bit this summer. He was with the Rams initially, didn't last long there, and then finished the summer with the Ravens, did not stick. So, but he was one of those guys that I found to be one of the more enticing names out there when you see all these veteran kickers out there, and there's so many retreads. You already know what they can do, but you have a young kicker here that has a lot of optimism surrounding his career and some upside there. So I thought that the Eagles I'm sure the Eagles were thankful that he was out there, and they bring him in. You all of a sudden you have an upside-laden kicker that you can sort of work with. And I would anticipate maybe you try and see if you can keep him around on the practice squad once Jake Elliott's good to go.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, a couple other injuries. Avonte Maddox did not practice that ankle. Give us your thoughts about how the Eagles handled the slot last week. And then do you think they should stick with Josiah Scott? Do they have another option there?
I think that they should stick with Josiah Scott, and I thought that would be the plan going in. I thought that there was an outside chance that perhaps Zach McPherson could get a look there. But Zach is their top outside option, so he played pretty well in place of Slay. And then I thought Josiah Scott manned the nickel fairly well. He had a lapse in coverage there, but there are going to be some growing pains there with a young player like that. And instead of moving your safety in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the nickel and then having someone like Kayvon Wallace back there, I think that makes you weaker in 2 different areas rather than just keep the status quo at safety and bring in a guy. I mean, they stashed Josiah Scott for his versatility for times like these. So I thought that he made the most logical sense to kind of plug in there and weather the storm until Maddox can come back. Maddox is playing at a high level, guys, and you want him good to go without any potential setbacks. So, I mean, I think Josiah Scott is equipped enough to be able to, like I said, weather the storm in the interim. And handle it well. I mean, there's enough competent pieces in the secondary, and all three levels are playing so well right now that I think that having Josiah Scott there in the nickel, it's not such a glaring blemish as it would be in other years. There's a lot of different ways that they can kind of make up for that.
Andrew Gill's nightmare scenario earlier in the show was that Josiah Scott would have to cover Zach Ertz, and that would be a matchup nightmare. Is that something you worry about?
Well, I mean, that's a fair concern. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona tried to do that. But I think Josiah Scott, to me, would be someone who would see a lot of Rondale Moore, who is their 5'7" jitterbug type of receiver, very terrific short area quickness. Hasn't done a lot this season. I think he only has 5 targets. Last week was his first week back. But he's somebody that's electric in open space, and I think that he could potentially pose some problems there. I think that Arizona's going to try everything they can to get him, Josiah Scott, isolated on Zach Ertz. But I think the Eagles will have a contingency plan ready for that. I think James Bradbury would be a fantastic option there, as would Kaiser White, just from an athletic standpoint and size standpoint. But yeah, I mean that would be a pretty worst case scenario for the Eagles if that were to happen.
Yeah, the other guy on the injury list, Andrew, is Jordan Mailata. The shoulder did not practice, and Thursday he's not out there. And I guess he's another guy similar to what you said about Elliott. You can kind of take it easy with because you're 4-0, you're feeling pretty good, and they have capable guys to step in here. So I would imagine the fact that he didn't practice today is kind of saying that we're probably not going to rush him back. How did Driscoll play? And let me ask you, if Dillard is ready to go, would you go with Dillard or do you stick with Driscoll?
Well, to answer that second part, I would stick with Driscoll just based on him being able to carry his momentum late in the game, which I thought he improved drastically throughout the game. You want to carry that momentum in there. I think Jalen Hurts really, when Jalen Hurts was, when Jack was actually talking at his locker after the game, Jalen walked by and definitely gave him a vote of confidence, saying good job and things like that. I think that he's really come a long way, Jack Driscoll, and he's such a dependable option that I would stick with that rather than putting someone like Andre Dillard, who obviously he's the superior option, but he hasn't played football in a long time. You don't want to just throw him out there for the lion's share of the snaps, risk re-injury, and then that's a whole other setback and a whole other line of questions that you have to really figure out how that's going to shake out down the line. I thought that Jack Driscoll looked a little undermanned right off the bat. I thought he was a little overwhelmed, and that's to be expected. He doesn't have the size or the strength from a prototypical left tackle standpoint, but he is very technical, and I thought that he held his own as the game wore on, which is really encouraging because Jacksonville does have a pretty formidable front. This week against Arizona, they don't have the numbers there. They do have someone named J.J. Watt who plays there, but other than that, they don't have it. And J.J. leads the team in sacks with 2. But I would kind of just to keep the spirit of continuity, I would be more apt to trot Jack out if Jordan can't go, of course.
Andrew DiCecco's with us, football at 4, and I see Boston Scott listed on here, limited participation. Well, last week, Boston Scott was out for the game. That meant Trey Sermon got a look. Miles Sanders got all the headlines, Andrew, but what did you see in a very limited look out of Trey Sermon?
Yeah, Trey Sermon, he got a couple of carries. I think he had, 19 yards on 2 carries. That first one popped for 14. Brings a downhill element. And I think if the Eagles had their option and if they had their way, they would probably like to dress Trey Sermon in place of in place of Boston Scott because he gives the team such a different element at running back. But the thing is, how is he going to hold up in pass protection? There's certain things that Boston Scott's able to do that sort of goes unnoticed, but you have a lot of the same players in the skill set in Miles and Boston and Kenny Gainwell that Trey Sermon gives them a different element in the backfield. It was nice to see him get out there and have a couple runs. I had a chance to speak to him after the game. He said he's very comfortable and the offense suits his skill set pretty well. It's similar to the things that he's done at Oklahoma and Ohio State. And he just seemed pretty jazzed to get in there and be able to make a couple plays. And I'm interested to see if they keep him active depending on what happens with Boston Scott.
We had Sal Powell on earlier, and he was talking about the Eagles' offensive strategy and that we like to think with A.J. Brown around and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert that these guys are a passing football team now. And the truth of it is that they really seem to still be a run-first team. How do you view the offense 4 weeks in? Are they run-first? Are they pass-heavy? Which way do you see it leaning?
Well, with last week being the outlier due to the elements, which is really, obviously that was a drastic situation, I think that they would like to be a balanced football team. They invested in, they have weapons there, and Jalen's really taken the next step in his development, and I think that you're seeing just the natural progression and growth in Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Jalen Hurts, and everyone's just clicking. Everything's just clicking so well that I think the Eagles they're certainly not like last year where that was run. I think now they really have a good balance there, and everything's really clicking and firing on all cylinders. So I think, with last week being the outlier, of course, given the conditions, I think you're going to still see a relatively balanced offensive approach, and you're going to see a lot more of Devontae Smith and a really good balance and blend to get everybody else involved. Quez Watkins has been pretty quiet for the past couple of weeks, so I would anticipate him getting a couple catches this week and taking advantage of the Arizona secondary.
Yeah, we're talking with Andrew DiCecco. Let's look at some of the matchups that Arizona has. Arizona loves to blitz. They blitz more than anybody in the league. So how does that stack up for Philadelphia in the offense? The last time we saw a team blitz a lot, it was Detroit. They put up a lot of points. So do you anticipate that matchup happening, the blitz from Vance Joseph's defense coming after Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I do, Mike, and the reason why is because they have the personnel to do so. I mean, Budda Baker is a Swiss Army knife on the back end. Then you have a guy like Zaven Collins from Tulsa who is a do-it-all linebacker, very good size, tenacity, everything you look for in a second-level player. And then you also have Isaiah Simmons and Marcus Golden, who's bounced around a little bit, and he's also pretty apt as a pass rusher. So they do have the personnel to do it, and I think you might see continue to see a downhill attack-style approach from the Arizona defense, trying to get Jalen out of his comfort zone, get him on the move a little bit, off balance, and force him to make plays outside of structure. Now, Jalen has proven so far through 4 games, guys, that he can really, no matter what you throw at him, he's found a way to sort of diffuse it and find a way to prevail and find success. Last week, it was finding a way to make the plays when it mattered, when he had to take the ball over the goal line, take that hit. Yeah, he only threw for 204 yards or things like that, but he made timely throws, and they got their running game going. So, I mean, it doesn't seem to matter what teams throw at Jalen. I just think that he's going to find a way to take advantage and exploit it. But, yes, to answer your question, I do think you're going to see a lot of blitzing just given the personnel and matchups. Yeah,
this is there's a lot of compelling stories. The Eagles sacked the quarterback more than anybody else so far, but one of the toughest guys to get to is Kyler Murray.
Yeah,
so how do you see the Eagles' pass rush, which has been the best, in this situation? They played Goff, not very mobile. Obviously, Wentz, who holds the ball forever.
Statue.
Cousins, not very mobile. And Trevor Lawrence, probably the most mobile of that group. But none of those 4 nearly as mobile as the guy they'll see on Sunday.
Yeah, just watching Kyler Murray, it's kind of funny to watch him play because he reminds me of a centipede and how elusive and he is in the backfield and the way he kind of moves around and navigates through traffic. But he's a guy that I think you need to be really patient with and not send the house and really play off and tentative, because that's really where he can beat you. They don't have a ton of options on the outside of Marquise Brown, who leads the receivers right now in catches. They have AJ Green, who hasn't done a whole lot this season. They have Rondale Moore coming back from injury. Of course, Zach Ertz is still there, but I think that their biggest weapon on offense is Kyler Murray and his legs. So knowing that, you have to be able to play it safe, spy him, and not be overly aggressive in how you attack him, because he can beat you in that way. So the Eagles have not seen a quarterback quite like that this season with this defensive lineup that they have, and outside of Trevor Lawrence, who's not even in the same ballpark in terms of his ability to escape the pocket. But yeah, I mean, I think that the matchup-wise, to a man, I think the Eagles have the upper hand from a defensive line standpoint. So I think they should be able to generate pressure without having to send a blitz.
Is the X factor for you in this game Andrew Hurts? I mean, I was looking through 4 weeks. He has 53 carries. The next closest is Lamar Jackson at 37. I mean, if you branch that out, he'd be on pace for 225 carries, way above Jackson's 176. It almost seems like when in doubt, Hurts can pull it down and run and change the ballgame.
Well, I think Hurts is the X factor every week. It's just being a multifaceted player that's really seeing the game well, really just everything he's doing just seems to be working. But to answer your question, I think this week the X factor to me would be Devontae Smith. I think he's going to have an opportunity to take advantage of the secondary, be it Byron Murphy, the corner, the former first-round pick, or Marco Wilson, the former fourth-round pick out of University of Florida. I just think that this is a week where Devontae gets back on track, and you start to really see the aerial attack take flight again, much like you saw against the Washington Commanders. But, yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is always going to be the X factor, but in the true sense this week, I think to give you a different answer, I think it's going to be Devontae Smith.
Yeah, and one matchup, the Eagles run the ball very well, second-best win rate among offensive lines in football. What's the ability? They ran the ball for 200-plus yards over 50 times last week.
So much for that.
If they want to go back to the run, will there be yards to be had?
Yeah, there sure will. And it's something that I don't know that it's been discussed enough prior to Miles Sanders having that big game against the Jaguars. He's been running with a lot more authority, a lot more decisiveness, a lot more of this downhill power element to Miles. And I think he's seeing things a lot better. He's just anticipating things, and he's taking advantage of the crease when it is there. He hasn't had less than 80 rushing yards in any game except for Week 3 in Washington. So I think that the Eagles have proven to me, and I said this to someone the other day, that they can really score whenever they want to, and it's kind of scary the way that they're able to marry both the passing game and the running game and just be able to execute with such efficiency right now. Shane Steichen's calling plays at a masterful level right now, and I really think that if they want to run the ball, if that's the approach that they want to take into this game, it'll be there. The yards will be there. I really think that the only thing that can really stop the Eagles are themselves right now.
Obviously, Murray's running ability is a problem, but what on their offense? No Hopkins here, so what's the worry when you look at the other skill players other than Murray and what he can do?
I think when you look at what he has to throw to outside of that security blanket and Zach Ertz, I think and Marquise Brown is someone who can obviously win downfield. He has that speed dimension to his skill set, but he's not somebody that can regularly win. So I think you see Kyler Murray press a lot. I think he feels like he has to do a lot given the skill set, the lack of firepower around him. So I think you are going to naturally see him run around and try and create plays with his legs because there's not a whole lot there, not a lot of plays to be made. And the way that the Eagles secondary is, it's very suffocating right now. They're really playing cohesive, and the each level is complementing one another. So I think when you have all those things, and you have an offense that's sort of struggling in the Arizona Cardinals, you find that the young quarterback feels like he has to do it all. And there's a lot of pressure on him to make things happen, which, as we all know, that's how turnovers happen, and that's how the game can change in a heartbeat.
What's your take, Andrew, on the Arizona running game? Because other than Connor, they got Benjamin Williams behind him, but they haven't really – Murray's the one that tends to do the most of the running, and that all seems improvised.
Yeah, I mean, James Conner is a pretty much a one-dimensional runner. He's more of a power guy. I think if you get in the red zone, he's someone that has a nose for the end zone, and he's gonna bust it between the tackles and try and do that. But yet they don't really have a home run hitter that's going to strike fear into an opposing defense, right? I think Benjamin, who you mentioned from Arizona State, he's a really diminutive player, but he does have some short area quickness, and I think that he's a weapon that we haven't even talked about special teams, but I think that he's someone that can really threaten them in that way because the Eagles, if you're looking at one weakness, it is their special teams all around. But, Benjamin's more their pass receiving running back, but I don't know that James Conner really gives you much or strikes fear into a defense. He's more of a plotter at this stage of his career and someone that's going to churn out 3-4 yards at a time. But the Eagles, I think, to me, have proven and have answered some stiff tests, in my opinion, as far as bottling up the running game. Just when I thought that maybe that was going to be one of their flaws this year on defense, they've answered that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that James Conner is the guy that's going to be threatening on the ground this week.
Well, I'll tell you this: they stink at home for whatever reason.
Yeah,
they do not play well at home. They've lost 7 straight at home, PT, and they're a much better road team. They went to Carolina last week. They won. They won in Vegas. They lost at home so far. This is a team that has a lot of holes, not a good home team, and it kind of sets up pretty well, I think, for Philly. And you look at big plays. The Eagles have the most big plays, explosive plays in the league, and this is a defense that I think, Andrew, can be had. There's not a guy on that defense that you're like, I mean, even Watt is not playing at the same level that we remember him in Houston, but they don't really have a guy in that secondary that you're like, okay, we got to figure out where this number is, right?
No, I mean, if you really want to find one and try and just put a stamp on someone that you could give that title to, maybe Buda Baker, just because he can do so many different things. But, not really. They don't really have a difference maker on that defense that I think if you're the Eagles, you have to account for at all times. I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Thursday it is here on the Sports Bash, Football at 4. Give us your thoughts, your pick for the Eagles and Cardinals.
Yeah, I like the Eagles to win this game. I don't know. I don't think it'll be. I mean, anytime you travel out there, and the Eagles always seem to be in a dogfight with Arizona, one way or the other. So I don't know that it's going to be one that they win going away, but I could see them pulling away late and maybe like a 27-17, something like that, in the desert there. So. I think it could be closely contested throughout much of the game, and I think the Eagles, who are ultimately the better team, will pull away later in the game.
All right, Andrew's back next Thursday. We'll be breaking down with him. Big week. Eagles and the Cowboys when he is back here on the Sports Bash. Follow him at DiCecco NFL and InsideTheBirds.com and another edition of Football at 4. All right, Andrew, take care, buddy.
You got it, guys. Talk soon.